Welcome to English Through Ideas podcast, where we learn English through powerful ideas.
Right.
So today we are taking a deep dive into the life of a man who, well, he was actually legally banned from school.
Yeah, it is pretty wild to think about.
It really is. He was denied his father's profession, and he was entirely self-taught, but, he still managed to write the first professional resume, he hacked the human brain, and he even tried to steal an entire river.
Which is just an incredible list of achievements.
Oh, absolutely. I am, of course, talking about Leonardo da Vinci, but the goal of our deep dive today isn't just to, recite history facts at you.
Exactly. I mean, the most fascinating part of his story isn't just what he painted. It is how his specific way of thinking can completely change how you approach your own learning
Right.
and your communication and, your personal growth.
Yeah, because if you look at the biographical research, his life starts with this massive, just a huge roadblock. He was born in 1452 out of wedlock.
Which basically means his parents were not married when he was born.
Exactly. And in 15th century Italy, that status, it slammed a lot of doors shut for him. He was legally prohibited from inheriting his father's respected job as a legal writer.
Right.
And worse, he was completely banned from getting a formal Latin education.
What's fascinating here is how this lack of formal schooling actually became his superpower.
Really? How so?
Well, think about what formal education looked like back then. Teachers mostly just told students to read these ancient Greek and Roman texts,
Uh-huh.
and then they had to memorize them and accept them as absolute, unquestionable facts. You couldn't challenge the books.
So it was very rigid.
Extremely rigid.
Yeah.
But because Leonardo was excluded from that system, his mind was completely free from those old rules. He had to teach himself everything through direct observation.
I love that. It is exactly like someone today being locked out of the traditional university system, right? So they are forced to build their own custom, self-taught curriculum based purely on what they are curious about.
Yes, exactly.
So you don't get handed a textbook. You have to go out and look at the real world.
And he actually had a specific phrase for this practice. He called it saper videre.
Saper videre, what does that translate to?
It is Italian for knowing how to see. It meant direct, intense observation. I mean, you don't just glance at a tree as you walk by.
Right, you really look at it.
You study the exact angle of how the branches grow. You look at how the shadows fall across the leaves. You figure out the mechanics of the tree.
But knowing how to see a tree doesn't exactly pay the rent.
No, it definitely doesn't.
If you are a self-taught outsider, you still have to convince powerful rich people to actually hire you. So how did he do that?
Well, that brings up this amazing letter he wrote in 1482 to Ludovico Sforza. He was the Duke of Milan.
Right, I read about this. It is basically the first professional resume in history.
It really is. And it is a total masterclass in the psychology of marketing. Because you have to understand who he was writing to.
The Duke.
Right. Sforza was an aggressive, warlike ruler. He was constantly fighting to defend his city and expand his territory.
So he is a military guy.
Completely. He didn't care about pretty pictures or philosophy. He cared about winning wars.
So if I'm Leonardo, right, a guy who loves painting, my natural instinct would be to send the dupe a portfolio of my best artwork and say, look at these beautiful colors, look at my talent.
Yeah, that is what most people would do.
But he doesn't do that at all.
Not even close. He writes this highly structured list of 10 points, and the first 9 points are entirely focused on military engineering and weapons.
Wow.
He pitches portable bridges that won't burn down. He promises cannons that shoot what he calls hailstorms of small stones to create panic on the battlefield.
That sounds terrifying.
Oh, it's designed to be. He even includes designs for covered chariots, which are basically the world's first armored military tanks.
So he is solving the Duke's biggest, most stressful problems. He is speaking the language of a warlord.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I noticed in the research that he waits until the very bottom of the page, the final paragraph, to casually mention his art.
Yes. It's almost like an afterthought.
He essentially writes, oh, and if there is peace, I can also paint and sculpt as well as anyone else.
And that sequence is not an accident. It is pure strategic empathy. He put himself completely inside the mind of his audience.
That is so smart.
If you want to persuade someone, you cannot just brag about your own passions. You have to show exactly how your skills fix their specific headaches.
That is incredibly relevant for anyone listening right now. Like, if you are applying for a job or trying to pitch a new idea to your boss,
Absolutely.
you shouldn't just list what you like doing. You have to figure out what keeps the hiring manager awake at night and then clearly show how you are the solution to that exact problem.
He is the ultimate lesson in communication.
But he didn't just manipulate his boss's ego to get a job. He realized he could actually manipulate the biology of the human eye to keep people looking at his paintings.
Yes, and that same strategic empathy carried right over into his art. He used biology to control how people experienced his work.
Which perfectly explains the Mona Lisa.
Right.
Because for hundreds of years, people have debated her famous, uncatchable smile. Sometimes she looks happy, and then, sometimes she looks serious.
People used to say it was magic.
Yeah, or just unexplainable genius.
Hmm.
But looking at the scientific research here from Professor Margaret Livingstone, it isn't magic at all. It is literally brain hacking.
It is a brilliant manipulation of human vision. To understand how he did it, we have to look at how our eyes actually work.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the human retina has two different ways of seeing the world. The first is central vision. That is what happens when you stare directly at something.
Like reading a book.
Right. This part of the eye, specifically the fovea, is built to pick up sharp details like tiny letters on a page. Scientists call these details high spatial frequencies.
High spatial frequencies. So that just means central vision is for finding sharp edges and clear lines.
Precisely. Now, on the other hand, we have peripheral vision. That is what you see out of the corners of your eyes.
And that part is pretty blurry, right?
Exactly. Your peripheral vision is terrible at seeing sharp details, but it is excellent at picking up blurry shapes, soft shadows, and larger forms.
Okay.
Scientists call those low spatial frequencies. And Leonardo understood this intuitively. When he painted the corners of the Mona Lisa's mouth, he didn't paint any sharp lines.
Oh, I see where this is going.
He used incredibly soft, smoky shadows that just slowly blend into her skin.
So for you listening, the next time you look at a picture of the Mona Lisa, try this trick. If you look directly at her mouth, you are using your central vision.
Right.
Your brain starts searching for sharp details. It wants a clear line showing a smile. But because Leonardo only painted blurry shadows there, your brain doesn't find a smile. So she looks serious.
But the moment you look up at her eyes, her mouth moves into your peripheral vision.
And peripheral vision loves blurry shapes.
Exactly. It easily picks up those smoky curves at the edge of her mouth, and suddenly, the smile magically appears. It is an interactive painting.
That is unbelievable. He was painting for the biology of the viewer.
He really was.
And he used that same obsession with science in another painting, the Salvator Mundi. That is the famous one of Jesus holding a clear glass orb.
Yes, the orb painting.
For a long time, art critics thought Leonardo had made a massive physics mistake there.
Right, because usually when you look through a solid glass ball, the objects behind it appear flipped upside down and totally distorted. It acts like a magnifying lens.
Yeah, everything gets warped.
But in Leonardo's painting, the clothes behind the glass orb are painted perfectly clear. There's barely any distortion at all.
Which made critics think, well, maybe he was tired or maybe his assistants painted it.
But that assumption completely underestimates him.
Okay, let's unpack this. Does this mean he was practically a neuroscientist and physicist 500 years before those jobs existed?
Basically, yes. Modern computer scientists actually built 3D virtual models to test this.
Yeah.
They wanted to see the exact way light would travel through glass in that specific setting.
And what did they find?
Their physics models proved that Leonardo was mathematically perfect. The only way the robes behind the glass would look that clear is if the orb was not a solid ball, but a hollow bubble of glass.
Wait, really? A hollow bubble?
Yes. Their math showed the glass sphere would have to be exactly 2.16 inches wide, with a glass wall only 1.3 millimeters thick.
That is stunning. He wasn't just guessing what looked nice. He was calculating the exact physics of light.
For him, there was absolutely no difference between science and art. To paint the world beautifully, you had to understand the physics of the world perfectly.
And that philosophy really separates a true master from someone who is just copying things superficially.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, his deep observation gave his work a truth that his assistants and rivals just couldn't fake.
Which perfectly brings up the mystery of the Virgin of the Rocks.
Oh, this is a great example.
There are two versions of this famous painting. One hangs in the Louvre Museum in Paris, which is authentic, and the other is in the National Gallery in London, which was mostly done by his assistants. But for decades, people argued over how to tell them apart, for sure.
And experts didn't solve that mystery by just looking at brushstrokes. They used geology and botany.
Because of his sapir-vide practice.
Exactly. He spent years climbing mountains, studying how rocks break apart and how rivers cut through stone.
And you can see that clearly in the authentic Paris painting. The rocks look incredibly real. He painted what geologists call sedimentary sandstone.
Which is a soft rock made of compressed layers of sand, right?
Yes, exactly. And he painted it breaking away from a much harder rock called diabase. It perfectly follows the natural laws of erosion.
And his plants follow the strict laws of botany, too. He painted real flowers, like the iris, growing exactly where they naturally would.
Which is near water, right?
Right. An iris needs wet, porous sand to grow. Its roots cannot push through solid stone, so in the authentic painting, the flowers are only growing in the wet, sandy soil.
But the London painting, the one done by the assistants, it gets all of that wrong.
Completely wrong. The assistants painted blocky, fake rocks that actually defy gravity.
They just look like cheap theater props.
Yeah, and the flowers they painted are these strange hybrid plants that don't even exist in nature. And they are growing straight out of solid, dry rock.
Because the assistants were just painting what they thought looked pretty. They were copying the surface without understanding the reality underneath.
They didn't understand the why behind the what.
Which is a massive takeaway for you listening. When you are learning a new language or trying to master a new skill at work, ask yourself, are you just memorizing phrases and copying what other people do?
Right.
Or are you deeply observing how things actually work? True mastery only comes when you understand the deep structure of a thing.
That is a great way to frame it. But, we also need to remember that searching for that deep reality is messy.
Very messy.
We talk about him as this flawless genius, but true growth means looking at failures, too. And Leonardo had some massive ones.
Yes, he did. We have to talk about the time he basically became a comic book supervillain.
The river scheme.
Yes, he tried to steal a river. So he teamed up with a young diplomat named Niccolo Machiavelli.
Who was brilliant, but very ruthless.
Very. They were in Florence, and Florence was locked in a brutal war with a rival city, Pisa. So Leonardo and Machiavelli create this wild plan to literally move the Arno River away from Pisa.
The logic was just brutal. If you take away the river, Pisa loses its drinking water, they lose their farming and their access to the sea. The city would just have to surrender.
So what did Leonardo do?
He spent months doing incredibly complex calculations on water pressure, fluid dynamics, and gravity. He engineered a plan to dig one massive deep trench that would force the river to change its path.
Okay, let me guess. He had a perfect theoretical plan on paper, but the real-world execution was a disaster.
You nailed it. The man in charge of the actual digging was a stubborn field engineer named Colombino.
Uh-oh.
And Colombino thought he knew better. He looked at the plans and said, digging one deep trench is too hard. So he completely ignored Leonardo's precise math.
Of course he did.
He ordered his workers to dig 2 shallow trenches instead. He assumed the river would eventually just wash away the dirt between them.
But you cannot cheat physics.
No, you can't. When a massive storm hit, the heavy water rushed in, quickly destroyed the weak walls Colombino built, and the river just flowed right back into its original path.
The entire project collapsed.
It did. It shows the painful gap between a brilliant idea and flawed execution.
And honestly, that wasn't even his most public failure. We have to bring up his bitter rivalry with Michelangelo.
Oh, the ultimate clash of egos.
They really hated each other, and they had completely opposite styles. Michelangelo was younger, and he was obsessed with the idealized, perfect human body.
Right, while Leonardo focused on the chaotic, brutal reality of nature.
Exactly. So the leaders of Florence decide to force them into a direct competition. They hired both men to paint massive battle scenes on opposite walls of the exact same room in the Palazzo Vecchio.
It was a public duel.
Yes. And Leonardo, being Leonardo, he couldn't just paint a normal mural. He had to innovate. So he used an experimental wax-based paint for his piece, The Battle of Anghiari.
But the stone wall was damp, right?
Yeah, and the paint wouldn't dry. So in a panic, he brought in these huge heaters, basically giant indoor fires, to dry the paint faster.
Which was a terrible mistake.
A catastrophic mistake. The extreme heat from the fires melted the wax in the paint. His beautiful masterpiece literally melted and ran down the wall, totally ruined.
Right in front of his rival.
It is so embarrassing. But honestly, I find that incredibly comforting.
How so?
Well, if you are struggling to learn something new or you feel embarrassed because you made a mistake at work, just remember that the smartest man in history melted his own masterpiece in public.
That is a great point. Failure is just the reality of trying new things.
Exactly. You are going to have days where your wax melts down the wall.
And the important thing is that those failures didn't stop him from observing the world.
Mm.
In fact, his intense observation didn't just make him smart, it made him deeply empathetic.
Oh, right, like his stance on animals.
Yes.
The research reveals a surprising detail. Leonardo was likely a strict vegetarian.
Which was incredibly rare in Renaissance Europe.
Unheard of. Meat was a massive symbol of wealth. But he would even buy caged birds in the market with his own money, just to set them free.
This raises an important question, though. How did a man of science justify this level of empathy back then?
How did he?
He used evolutionary biology. He hypothesized that nature only gave pain receptors to living things that have the mobility to run away from danger.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. Plants cannot move. If a fire starts, they can't run. So he reasoned that plants don't feel pain because pain serves no survival purpose for them.
But animals can move.
Right. Pain tells an animal to escape. Therefore, animals must suffer, just like we do.
That is profound. He is combining moral empathy with biology. And it really shows how he saw the universe as this deeply connected system.
Which is perfectly captured in his most famous drawing, the Vitruvian Man.
Oh, the sketch of the man standing inside the circle in the square.
Yes. It represents the microcosm and the macrocosm. It is this beautiful idea that the mechanics of the human body reflect the exact same mechanics of the entire universe.
So the way our blood flows is like the way rivers flow across the earth.
Exactly. We are a mirror of the universe.
That is a beautiful way to see the world. And it really brings us to his final years.
In France, right.
Yes, living under the protection of King Francis I. Even with a paralyzed right hand from a stroke, he never stopped learning. He kept sketching storms and organizing his notebooks.
His curiosity never faded.
Never. And that leads to this poignant, almost funny detail in his notebook, the very last words he ever wrote.
Oh, I love this part.
He was right in the middle of writing down a profound mathematical thought. And then he just stops and writes, "I must go. My soup is getting cold."
It is just so human.
It really is. Even a genius has to eat.
And I think that is a wonderful, provocative thought for you, our listener, to reflect on today. We all have these cold soup moments, right?
Oh, constantly.
Life's mundane tasks will always interrupt us. You have to do the laundry, commute to work, answer emails.
But the question is, how do you keep your curiosity alive between those chores? Can you practice Semper Videre, knowing how to see on your commute tomorrow?
Exactly. Can you deeply observe the people around you? Can you listen to your boss the way Leonardo listened to the Duke of Milan?
Can you look at your own life and instead of just superficially copying others, really try to understand the deep truth of how things work? Thank you for learning with English through ideas. If you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe for more ideas, more English, and more growth.